Dr. Martin Harris and his wife, Elizabeth, are on a flight to Berlin, where he's set to speak at a biotech conference. After landing, they hop into a cab, but in the rush, Martin forgets his briefcase at the airport. Even though his schedule is packed, he's promised Elizabeth they'll check out an exhibition together. Once they reach the hotel, Martin deals with the bags while Elizabeth heads to the front desk.
May I help you, madam?
Dr. and Mrs. Harris, the eyes.
Just then, he realizes his briefcase is missing. Meanwhile, Elizabeth runs into trouble with their reservation.
Everything from the taxi?
Yes, sir.
Before she can react, Martin jumps back into a taxi to retrieve his belongings. She's left confused, watching him leave. Martin tries to call Elizabeth, but there's no signal. Stuck in traffic, he asks the cab driver, a young woman,
The route?
to take another route. Suddenly, something falls off a truck ahead, forcing her to swerve sharply. The car crashes off a bridge and into a river. Martin bangs his head hard. The driver smashes the window to escape as the vehicle sinks, but Martin is out cold. Despite the danger, the driver swims back and drags him out. They're both rescued, and an ambulance arrives. Martin isn't breathing, so the paramedics rush to revive him. As he hovers between life and death, flashes of his wife fill his mind. When Martin finally wakes up in the hospital, a doctor is speaking, but since Martin doesn't understand German, he struggles to follow. Luckily, Dr. Farge, who speaks English, steps in. Martin remembers his name, but draws a blank on what happened.
You have been in an...
The doctor informs him that his heart stopped for several minutes, and he was in a coma for 4 days. Martin's first thought is Elizabeth. Where is she? But without any ID or documents.
The taxi you were in went into...
The hospital couldn't contact her. Worse, he can't recall her phone number or many other details. Dr. Farge diagnoses him with partial amnesia, explaining that some memories might return while others may never come back.
I don't know how I got here.
Confused and frustrated, Martin later learns from a nurse named Gretchen that no one has reported him missing. Could Elizabeth not be looking for him? Glancing at his wristwatch, Martin recalls a memory. Elizabeth gifted it to him on their honeymoon. He also has a book from his father. When he sees news about the conference on TV, everything clicks. He should be there. Ignoring the doctor's advice, he signs himself out of the hospital.
If it's out there in a city she doesn't know, she'd be terrified.
His wife is alone in an unfamiliar city, and he needs to find her. Before he leaves, Dr. Farge gives him a business card in case he experiences more medical issues. Martin arrives at the hotel and tells the receptionist he lost his key and documents.
Yes, hi. I'm a guest of the hotel. I lost my...
That's when he spots Elizabeth and follows her. Since he lacks proper ID, Security Chief Harstrauss denies him entry to the guest area. However, after Martin insists on his identity, Strauss agrees to take him to Elizabeth.
There you are. I'm Strauss.
When Martin reaches her, she looks at him blankly. She doesn't recognize him. Shocked, Martin tries to explain, but Elizabeth insists she's never seen him before.
Oh, Jesus.
Then she introduces her husband, Dr. Martin Harris. Martin is floored. Someone has taken his place, and Elizabeth is going along with it.
Last time I looked.
Strauss investigates and finds no security footage of Martin at the hotel from 4 days ago.
Please, please.
Get your hands off. Why don't you just back?
Only Elizabeth. Supposedly, Martin left for the airport and returned alone at 3 p.m. The evidence makes no sense. Martin keeps insisting he's the real Dr. Harris,
At 8:50, she checked into their suite.
and that the man beside Elizabeth is an imposter. He suggests calling his American colleague, Rodney Cole, who can vouch for him. Security tries to contact Cole, but they only reach voicemail.
Why? For God's sake. Just...
The only person in Berlin who knows Martin is Professor Bressler, but they've never met in person, only spoken over the phone. Strauss is convinced Martin is delusional. He even shows him a picture of Dr. Harris from the conference website. It's the man currently enjoying his stay at the hotel.
Yes. Well, we haven't actually met.
Martin's mind is spinning. Strauss can't even call the U.S. Embassy for help. It's closed for Thanksgiving weekend. To avoid being arrested, Martin apologizes, pretending the doctor warned him about memory gaps. Security escorts him to a taxi, but Martin has no intention of going back to the hospital. As he rides through the city, Martin spots Elizabeth in a restaurant, happily dining with a man claiming to be him. Frustration and confusion boil inside him. He leaves a desperate voicemail for Rodney Cole, explaining the bizarre situation. Suddenly, he feels like someone is watching him. A black car seems to be tailing him. Spooked, Martin ditches the street for the subway. He hears footsteps behind him, but when he turns, there's no one. He keeps moving, but then a man starts following him. Panicking, Martin rushes into a subway car just as the doors close, losing his pursuer. Trying to piece things together, Martin remembers his scheduled meeting with Professor Bressler. He decides to track him down, but his memories are so scattered he isn't sure what's real. When more fragments of the accident return, Martin contacts a transport agency to find a cab driver from that day. Turns out, she doesn't have a license. She's an undocumented migrant. Martin insists he only wants to thank her. A man named Jurgen agrees to help. Meanwhile, the driver, Gina, has moved on and is now working at a cafe. When Martin finds her, she refuses to talk, scared of getting involved. With nowhere else to turn, Martin heads to Bressler's lab. That's where he comes face to face with the other Martin Harris. The professor is baffled. Both men share detailed knowledge of their past conversations. When Martin calls the police to arrest the imposter, the other Martin calmly pulls out an ID and a picture with Elizabeth. Stunned, Martin collapses. Back at the hospital, Nurse Gretchen gives Martin a contact for someone who helps lost people. Dr. Farge tries to reason with him, explaining that his coma may have warped his memories. Maybe he read about Dr. Harris before the accident and convinced himself he was him. As Martin processes this, he notices a familiar face, the man who had followed him in the subway. Dressed as a doctor, the man suddenly injects Martin with something. Then he kills the nurse to cover his tracks. As he prepares to finish Martin, a distraction allows Martin to grab scissors and escape. Stumbling through the hospital, still affected by the drug, he barely manages to shake his attacker before fleeing in an ambulance. Martin is more certain than ever someone wants him dead. But why? He calls the other Martin, staying silent before hanging up. Meanwhile, Elizabeth sits calmly with the imposter. Determined to get answers, Martin meets Jurgen, who once worked for East Germany's secret police. Martin shares his story, and Jurgen suspects Elizabeth is part of the conspiracy. Martin refuses to believe it. He and Elizabeth loved each other. Maybe she's being threatened. But what's the endgame? Why would she deny her real husband's existence? It doesn't add up. Still, Jurgen agrees to investigate and says he'll reach out to Rodney Cole. In the meantime, Martin should find Gina again. Martin tracked her down, but she's still hesitant. Knowing she fears deportation, he offers her his expensive watch as payment. Reluctantly, Gina agrees to talk. That night, she lets him crash at her place. She shares her dream of leaving the country, and Martin begins to trust her. Just then, a friend of hers, Boo, stops by, handing her car keys. Moments later, while Martin is in the shower, assassins storm the apartment. They knock Gina out and search for Martin, who barely manages to hide on the rooftop. One of the attackers tries to inject Gina with a drug, but she regains consciousness and fights back. Hearing the commotion, Martin realizes he has no choice but to face his enemies head-on. In a matter of seconds, the mercenary grabbed Gina, but before he could do anything, Martin attacked him from behind. Seizing the opportunity, Gina broke free while the two men wrestled on the staircase. As the struggle continued, Gina noticed Boo lying motionless. Hearing footsteps, she quickly found a place to hide. Meanwhile, the mercenary tightened his grip around Martin's throat, cutting off his air supply. Gina acted fast, sneaking up from behind and injecting the mercenary with the same substance he had used earlier. Martin demanded to know who he was, but the man's strength faded, and he collapsed before answering. Without wasting another second, Martin and Gina rushed out of the house, jumped into Boo's car, and sped off. Just as they thought they were in the clear, a black car appeared, blocking their way. They made a quick turn in the opposite direction, but their pursuers stayed right on their tail, weaving through the city streets. Suddenly, their car flipped at high speed. As a train approached on the tracks nearby, Martin and Gina barely managed to escape before the train crashed into the wreckage. Seeking a safe spot, they dashed into the nearest bar. Overcome with anger and frustration, Gina slapped Martin, blaming him for losing her friend and all her money. Martin insisted he had nothing to do with the people after them. But Gina had a pretty good idea of who they were: government operatives, the same ones who had taken her parents and brothers from her years ago. Flipping through her father's old book, she came across pages filled with addresses and numbers. Martin examined them closely. It looked like some kind of code. He assured Gina he would find a way to set things right. The next day, they met with Jurgen. It was clear that Professor Bressler and Prince Shoda were connected. Shoda had been funding Bressler's research, which aimed to solve world hunger. However, not everyone was happy about it. Extremist groups had been threatening the prince, but he remained firm in his mission. Later that day, there was a small reception before the professor's big presentation, and Shoda would be in attendance. The terrorists had a plan to use Martin's identity to get close and assassinate the prince. Determined to uncover the truth, Martin decided to find Elizabeth, knowing that the people holding her were tracking his every move. Despite the danger, Gina agreed to help. She kept an eye on the fake Martin, following him as he left a restaurant and got into a taxi. Remembering that he and Elizabeth had planned to attend an art exhibition, Martin headed to the gallery, where he spotted Elizabeth. A man was shadowing her every move. Gina sent Martin a message. His doppelganger was on his way. Waiting for the right moment, Martin finally managed to approach Elizabeth. At first, she pretended not to know him, but he could tell she was scared. Then, after a tense pause, she admitted the truth. If they left together now, they would both be dead. She hinted that everything revolved around the briefcase Martin had left at the airport. They agreed to meet there. When Gina arrived, she saw Martin and Elizabeth sharing a kiss. For reasons she couldn't explain, it unsettled her. After confessing her love for Martin, Elizabeth left. Meanwhile, Jurgen received photos from airport security showing Martin and Elizabeth together. That same day, Rodney Cole, someone claiming to be Martin's old friend, arrived in Berlin. He arranged to meet with Jurgen, who quickly realized that Cole was no ordinary man. He was from Section 15, a group of mercenaries who worked for the highest bidder. Jurgen, knowing he was terminally ill, understood that Cole wouldn't let him live. Before Cole could take action, Jurgen drank poison coffee. With his last breath, he asked, "What happens if Martin remembers everything?" Meanwhile, Martin and Gina reached the airport. Acting as his translator, Gina helped him retrieve the briefcase. Inside, Martin found his passport, proving he was Martin Harris, an American citizen. A photo of him and Elizabeth was also inside. It all started to make sense, his identity, his past. But Gina wasn't convinced it was safe to stay. She feared Elizabeth had set a trap. Just as they were about to leave, Rodney Cole appeared. Martin still believed Cole was his friend, but the moment he got into the car, he was hit with a stun gun. Gina, witnessing everything, acted fast. Without hesitation, she hijacked a taxi and tailed the black car, carrying Martin. Martin was taken to an abandoned building and dumped onto the ground. Cole sneered at him, questioning whether he really believed he was Martin Harris. Confused, Martin demanded answers. Cole finally revealed the truth. Martin Harris never existed. He was a fabricated identity created for the mission. Elizabeth wasn't his wife, but a fellow operative. Their original plan had been thrown off by the car accident that gave him amnesia. By retrieving the briefcase, Martin had proven he was still a threat. Now, Cole had no choice but to eliminate him. Before Cole could finish the job, Gina stormed in, saving Martin just in time. Rummaging through the briefcase, Martin found countless fake documents. It hit him. Cole had been telling the truth. He wasn't really Martin Harris. In fact, he was one of the terrorists. His entire life, as he knew it, was a carefully crafted lie. He and Elizabeth had been in Berlin months ago, planting a bomb in the hotel where Prince Shoda was staying. Gina reminded him that his past no longer mattered. It was what he chose to do now that counted. Meanwhile, at the hotel, Prince Shoda arrived, surrounded by journalists. Security was tight. Elizabeth, along with the fake Martin Harris, greeted the prince. Professor Bressler, the mastermind behind the conference, had no idea he was the real target. The plan was unfolding exactly as designed. Elizabeth discreetly placed a flash drive in Bressler's bag and retreated to her room to download its contents. Martin and Gina arrived just in time to stop them. Trying to get inside, they were caught by security. Martin frantically warned them about a bomb, but no one believed him. Inside, Elizabeth finished her task and set the bomb's timer, 5 minutes. Seeing past security footage of Martin and Elizabeth at the hotel months ago under different identities, the head of security finally realized the truth and ordered an immediate evacuation. While the fake Martin aimed to kill Bressler, Elizabeth tried to deactivate the bomb to cover her tracks, but she ran out of time. The explosion went off, engulfing the room. At that moment, Martin's memories came rushing back. The mission had always been about obtaining Bressler's research, not killing the prince. If his work fell into the wrong hands, it would be worth billions. Determined to stop it, Martin confronted his doppelganger, engaging in a brutal fight. In the end, Martin overpowered him. Elizabeth, caught in the explosion, didn't survive. Gina watched everything unfold, terrified of what Martin might do next. But he turned to her with a different look in his eyes. He wasn't the same man anymore. Together, they walked away from the burning hotel, leaving their past behind. Shortly after, Professor Bressler announced his groundbreaking discovery, a fast-growing grain resistant to harsh conditions, made available to the world without a patent, a gift to humanity. Gina received her new identity, Claudia. Martin took the name Henry Taylor. With their new passports in hand, they disappeared into the crowd, leaving Berlin behind for good.